standing in my childhood bedroom at 28, packing the last of my belongings while my parents screamed downstairs about how ungrateful I am. 3 hours earlier, they'd handed me a lease agreement demanding $800 monthly rent for my basement room, claiming they needed the money to help my younger brother Derek buy a house. Derek, their golden child who'd never worked a real job, was getting a down payment gift while I, who'd been contributing to household expenses for years, was suddenly treated like a burden. I'm Irvin, and I've been working as an automotive technician at Henderson's Auto Repair for 5 years now, making decent money but trying to save enough to get my own place. The converted basement of our family's suburban home in Canton, Ohio, had become my temporary sanctuary after college. But temporary had stretched into 3 years. It'd been paying for utilities and groceries voluntarily, around $400 monthly, because it felt right to contribute to the household where I lived. My younger brother Derek, 25 years old, still occupied his childhood bedroom upstairs, complete with superhero posters and the same twin bed from high school. While I worked 40-plus-hour weeks getting my hands dirty under car hoods, Derek bounced between part-time gigs at coffee shops and claimed he was building a career as a freelance graphic designer. His portfolio consisted mainly of logos for friends, imaginary businesses, and social media graphics that never led to paying clients. Our parents, Susan and Robert Mitchell, had always treated Derek like he was destined for greatness, while expecting me to be the practical, responsible one. Throughout high school, I'd watched them make excuses when Derek skipped classes to play video games, while they grounded me for bringing home a single B grade. In college, they'd paid off Derek's student loans when he dropped out sophomore year, but I'd worked 2 jobs to graduate debt-free from community college. The pattern continued into adulthood. When Derek's car broke down, they bought him a newer one. When Derek's credit cards got maxed out, they quietly paid them off. When Derek needed money for art supplies or software subscriptions, they handed over cash without question. Meanwhile, I'd handled my own car payments, insurance, and expenses since turning 18. On that Tuesday evening in March, I'd just finished a 10-hour shift replacing an engine in a Ford pickup when I got the text. Family meeting tonight at 7. Important house discussion. I figured they wanted to talk about Derek's latest scheme or maybe discuss renovating the kitchen Mom had been complaining about. I walked into the living room expecting casual conversation, maybe some leftover pizza, and Derek's usual excuses for why his latest freelance project fell through. Instead, I found my parents sitting stiffly on the couch, with Derek positioned behind them like some kind of advisor. The coffee table held a manila folder that looked ominously official. "Irvin, we've been thinking about the house situation," Dad began, his voice carrying the tone he used for serious financial discussions. "You're almost 30, and we've decided it's time to make things more professional around here." Mom opened the folder and pulled out what looked like a formal lease agreement, complete with legal terminology and multiple pages. "We've prepared this rental agreement for your basement space. We think $800 monthly is fair market rate for a furnished room in this neighborhood." My stomach dropped. $800 for a basement room with no separate entrance, 1 small window, and a bathroom I shared with Derek? I'd looked at apartments recently, and $800 could get me a decent 1-bedroom place with my own kitchen and parking space. $800, I repeated, trying to process what was happening. "That's more than most apartments cost around here." Derek shifted behind them, and I caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like satisfaction in his expression. "It includes utilities and meals," he said, as if he'd been part of planning this ambush. "Why the sudden change?" I asked, looking between my parents' faces for some explanation that made sense. "I've been contributing to household expenses. I thought things were working fine." That's when Dad dropped the real bomb. "Derek's ready to buy a house, and we want to help him with the down payment. We're taking a second mortgage to give him $25,000, but we need additional monthly income to cover the payments." The room went silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Derek was getting $25,000 as a gift while they were charging me rent to pay for it. The golden child favoritism had reached a level I'd never imagined possible. "You're making me pay for Derek's house." The words came out harsher than I intended, but the reality was hitting me like a punch to the gut. "It's not paying for Derek's house," Mom said quickly. "It's paying fair rent for your living space. Derek's gift is separate." But the math was simple. They'd never charged me rent before. Derek had never contributed a dime to household expenses. Now they needed money to cover Derek's gift. And suddenly, I was the solution to their financial shortfall. Derek stepped forward, his confidence growing. "Maybe it's time for you to get your own place anyway, Irvin. You can't live in Mom and Dad's basement forever." The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek, who'd never lived anywhere but his childhood bedroom, was lecturing me about independence while accepting a house down payment from our parents. "I need an answer by tomorrow night," Dad said, closing the folder. "Either sign the lease and pay first month's rent, or make other arrangements." I looked at the three of them sitting there, united against me, and realized this wasn't really about money or fairness. This was about Derek wanting me gone, and our parents were willing to make me pay for the privilege of being pushed out. I spent that night in the basement, staring at the lease agreement and trying to understand how my family had become strangers. The next morning, I decided to talk to Derek privately, hoping maybe he'd show some awareness of how messed up this situation had become. I found him in the kitchen around noon, eating cereal and scrolling through his phone like nothing significant had happened. "Derek, can we talk about last night?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "What's to talk about?" "Mom and Dad want you to pay rent." "Seems fair to me." "Fair." I sat across from him at the breakfast bar where we'd eaten countless meals as kids. "They're making me pay $800 a month so they can afford to give you $25,000. How is that fair?" Derek finally looked at me, and what I saw in his expression shocked me. There was no embarrassment, no acknowledgement that the situation was awkward. Instead, he seemed almost amused. "You know what your problem is, Irvin? You think being a mechanic makes you special. You get your hands dirty and act like you're some blue-collar hero. But at the end of the day, you're just fixing other people's cars. I'm the creative one in this family. I'm building something that could actually be big." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Building what?" "You've been freelancing for 3 years and haven't landed a single major client." Derek's face hardened. "I've got projects in the works that you wouldn't understand. Mom and Dad see my potential. That's why they're investing in my future." "Investing?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Derek, they're giving you money for a house while charging me rent to pay for it. That's not investing. That's favoritism." Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Maybe if you weren't such a constant reminder of mediocrity around here, they'd be more generous with you too. I told them you make me feel like a failure just by existing." That sentence hit me like ice water. "You told them what?" I said, "Having you around makes me feel bad about my progress." They understood. That's why they suggested the rent idea. "Maybe if you're paying your fair share, it'll motivate you to finally move out and give me some space to succeed." I stared at my brother, really seeing him for the first time in years. This wasn't accidental favoritism or unconscious bias from our parents. Derek had been actively working to push me out, and had convinced them I was the problem. "Derek, I've never done anything to hold you back or make you feel bad. I've actually tried to support your projects." "Support?" Derek laughed coldly. "You mean those times you acted interested in my designs? That wasn't support, that was pity. I could see it in your face. Poor Derek can't make it as a real artist." The conversation was spiraling into territory I'd never expected. Derek wasn't just entitled, he was resentful in ways I'd completely missed. In his mind, my stability and steady income somehow diminished his own worth. I decided to try once more. "What if we found a solution that worked for everyone? Maybe I could help you build your business instead of moving out right away." Derek's expression shifted to something that looked almost like disgust. "I don't want your help, Irvin. I want you gone. This house isn't big enough for both of us anymore, and since I'm the one with real potential, you're the one who needs to leave." That evening, I approached our parents again, hoping to explain Derek's attitude and maybe help them see the manipulation. I found them in the family room watching television, the lease agreement still sitting on the side table like a looming deadline. "Mom, Dad, I think Derek's been saying things about me that aren't true. He told me he complained that I make him feel like a failure. Mom muted the television and turned to face me. Irvin, Derek's been struggling with self-confidence lately. He feels like he's constantly being compared to you and your steady job. We thought maybe giving him some space and treating this house more like a business arrangement would help everyone. But why am I the one who has to pay? Derek's never contributed to household expenses. Dad set down his reading glasses. Derek's working on building a career. You have an established income. It makes sense for you to contribute more substantially. I couldn't believe they were serious. Derek's 25 and living rent-free while I'm being charged $800 to subsidize his house fund. How does that help him build independence? Derek's situation is different, Mom said firmly. He's pursuing something creative and meaningful. Not just a regular job. The dismissal of my work stung. But more than that, I realized they genuinely believed Derek's graphic design dreams were more valuable than my skilled trade. They'd bought into his narrative that he deserved special treatment because his goals were more important. What if I told you Derek intercepted mail addressed to me? What if he's been hiding opportunities from me? Both parents looked skeptical. Dad shook his head slowly. Irvin, that sounds like an accusation you can't prove. Derek wouldn't do something like that. And honestly, Mom added, it sounds like you're trying to sabotage Derek's chance at homeownership because you're jealous. The word jealous hit me like a slap. They genuinely believed I was the problem, that I was holding Derek back through my mere existence in the house. Derek had done such a thorough job painting himself as the victim that they couldn't see his manipulation. I'm not jealous, Mom. I'm confused why one son gets $25,000 while the other gets charged rent to pay for it. Life isn't always perfectly equal, Irvin, Dad said. Derek needs help right now. You're capable of taking care of yourself. That phrase would stick with me for months afterward. I was being punished for my competence and self-sufficiency. Because I didn't need constant rescue and financial assistance, I was considered less deserving of support. You have 24 hours to decide, Dad continued. Sign the lease and pay first month's rent, or make arrangements to move out. Derek's already excited about converting your space into a creative studio. I went to bed that night knowing my family had chosen Derek over me, but I still didn't understand the full extent of what he'd done to orchestrate this situation. Instead of packing immediately or signing the lease, I decided to dig deeper into Derek's claims and behavior. Something about his confidence during our kitchen conversation bothered me. He'd seemed too prepared, like he'd been planning this confrontation for weeks. I started by calling Henderson's Auto Repair and asking if any mail had been delivered there for me recently. Sometimes customers or vendors sent personal correspondence to work addresses. My boss, Jim Henderson, checked the office and confirmed they hadn't received anything unusual. Then I remembered Derek always got to the mail first. He worked from home most days and usually brought in the mail around noon, often sorting through it before leaving it on the kitchen counter. He'd never thought much about it, but now I wondered what might have been filtered out before reaching me. Wednesday morning, I took a personal day from work and positioned myself near the front window around mail delivery time. When the postal worker arrived, I intercepted the mail directly. Mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements was a letter addressed to me from Precision Automotive Group, a large dealership network I'd never contacted. I opened it immediately and found a job offer letter dated 3 weeks earlier. They were offering me a service manager position at their facility 2 hours north in Cleveland, with a starting salary 40% higher than my current income plus benefits and relocation assistance. The letter indicated they'd received my resume through an industry networking site and were impressed with my experience and certifications. I'd never submitted a resume to any networking site, but I had created a professional profile on LinkedIn months earlier after attending a trade conference. Someone at Precision must have found my profile and reached out directly. The letter included a phone number and mentioned they'd tried calling but hadn't received a response. I checked my call history and found 3 missed calls from a Cleveland number over the past 3 weeks, calls it assumed were spam and ignored. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. When I reached the hiring manager, she seemed surprised to hear from me. Irvin, we were starting to think you weren't interested. We sent the offer letter and left several voicemails. I never received any voicemails, and I just found the letter today. I'm definitely interested. She paused. That's strange. We called the number listed on your LinkedIn profile. Is that not current? I confirmed the number was correct, which meant Derek had been answering my phone calls and deleting voicemails. The technology-savvy brother who managed all the family's wireless accounts and technical issues had been intercepting more than just mail. The position is still available if you're interested, she continued. We were impressed with your background and the recommendations from your current employer. Recommendations from Henderson's. Yes, we spoke with Jim Henderson last month. He gave you an outstanding reference and said you'd be perfect for a management role. Jim had never mentioned any reference call to me. I thanked the hiring manager and arranged to drive to Cleveland for an interview that Friday, then immediately called my boss. Jim, did someone from Precision Automotive call you about me? Sure did, about a month ago. Great opportunity for you, kid. I told them you were one of the best techs I'd ever worked with and ready for management. Figured you'd follow up with them directly. I never knew they called. I think someone's been intercepting my communications. Jim was quiet for a moment. That's serious, Irvin. Identity theft or family interference. Family interference? I think. Well, that's a different kind of problem entirely. But that Cleveland job is still good news if you want it. I spent Wednesday afternoon documenting everything I could find. Derek had access to the wireless account and could easily delete voicemails. He collected mail daily and could dispose of letters. His computer skills would let him monitor or redirect online communications if he wanted. Wednesday evening, I sat in my truck outside the house for an hour, trying to process the scope of Derek's manipulation. He hadn't just complained about me to our parents. Had actively worked to prevent me from finding opportunities that would let me leave on my own terms. He wanted me gone, but only after extracting maximum benefit from the situation. When I finally went inside, Derek was in the living room with Mom and Dad, discussing paint colors for his future creative studio. They looked up when I entered, and Derek's expression was carefully neutral. Any progress on your decision, Irvin? Dad asked. Actually, I have some questions about mail delivery and phone calls. Derek's face didn't change, but I caught a slight tension in his posture. What kind of questions? Mom asked. I'm missing some important communications, and I want to make sure they're not getting lost somehow. Are you expecting something specific? Derek's voice was casual, but his eyes were alert. A job offer from a company in Cleveland. They sent a letter and left voicemails, but I never received them. The room went quiet. Derek shrugged. Mail gets lost sometimes. Maybe they got the wrong address. They have the right address, and they have my correct phone number. I looked directly at Derek. Someone would have had to intercept both the letter and the voicemails. Mom frowned. That sounds paranoid, Irvin. Who would do something like that? Someone who wanted to control my options, I said, still watching Derek's face. Dad stood up, looking irritated. Irvin, this sounds like conspiracy thinking. Are you suggesting someone in this family would sabotage your mail? Derek finally spoke, his voice carrying just the right amount of hurt surprise. Are you accusing me of something, brother? I'm saying someone prevented me from receiving a job offer that would have let me move out months ago. Exactly what everyone claims to want. That's ridiculous, Mom said firmly. Derek wouldn't do something like that. And honestly, it sounds like you're making excuses to avoid making a decision about the lease. I realized then that Derek had positioned himself so well as the victim that any accusation against him would be seen as an attack. My parents' worldview required Derek to be the good son who needed protection, which meant I had to be the problem. Thursday morning, I drove to Cleveland for my interview at Precision Automotive. The facility was impressive, modern, and professionally run. The hiring manager, Sarah, and the general manager, Mike, interviewed me for 2 hours and offered me the service manager position on the spot. We can have you start in 2 weeks if you want, Mike said. The salary is $68,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and full benefits. Well-pay moving expenses up to $5,000. It was everything I'd worked toward in my automotive career. A management role with growth potential, excellent pay, and a chance to build something meaningful in my field. I accept. I said without hesitation. Thursday evening, I returned home with a signed employment contract and a plan. I was leaving Canton, Ohio, with or without my family's understanding. But I wasn't going to let Derek's manipulation go unaddressed. I found him in his room, working on his computer with headphones on. When I knocked on his doorframe, he pulled off the headphones and spun around in his desk chair. "Hey, what's up? I got the job in Cleveland. The one you tried to hide from me." For just a moment, Derek's mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in his expression. Then he recovered, putting on a confused face. "What job?" "I don't know what you're talking about. The offer letter you threw away. The voicemails you deleted. I know what you did, Derek." Derek stood up slowly, and his whole demeanor changed. The fake confusion disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like pride. "Prove it," he said simply. "Why, Derek? Why go to such lengths to sabotage me?" Derek walked to his window and looked out at the backyard where Wed played as kids. When he turned back, his expression was completely honest for the first time in our conversation. "Because you make me look like a failure just by existing, Irvin. You work hard, you pay your bills, you handle your responsibilities without drama. Mom and Dad pretend to treat us equally, but they respect you more than they'll ever respect me. That's not true. They're giving you $25,000. They're giving me money because they feel sorry for me," Derek said quietly. "They give you respect because they're proud of you. Do you know what it's like to be the son they feel sorry for?" For the first time, I understood Derek's perspective, even though his methods were inexcusable. "Derek, you could earn that respect if you wanted it. You're intelligent and capable. Not as capable as you, and I'm tired of living in your shadow. So yes, I threw away your job letter. I deleted your voicemails. I told Mom and Dad that having you around made me feel worthless. I wanted you gone so I could finally be the successful son instead of the disappointment. By manipulating our parents into charging me rent to pay for your house," Derek shrugged, "by whatever means necessary." I stared at my brother and realized he'd become someone I didn't recognize. The manipulation, the lies, the willingness to hurt family members to get what he wanted had turned him into a person I couldn't trust or respect. "I'm leaving this weekend, Derek. You're going to get your wish." "Good," he said. "Maybe now I can finally build something without you here to remind everyone what I should be accomplishing." As I left Derek's room, I heard him put his headphones back on and return to his computer, probably planning his next manipulation or drafting fake documents for his imaginary house purchase. Friday morning, I submitted my resignation at Henderson's Auto Repair, giving Jim 2 weeks' notice and explaining the family situation. He was understanding but sad to lose me. "That Cleveland job will be great for your career," he said. "But I'm sorry about the family mess. Sometimes blood relatives are the hardest people to deal with." I spent Friday evening researching Derek's house buying claims, something I probably should have done weeks earlier. I called the realtor whose business card Derek had shown our parents, claiming to have scheduled multiple house viewings. "Hi, I'm calling about my brother Derek Mitchell. Has been working with your office on house hunting in the Canton area." The receptionist put me on hold, then returned. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any clients by that name in our system. Are you sure he's working with our agency? He showed my parents your business card and said he'd been looking at houses with you for months. That's strange. Let me check with our agents." Another hold, then she was back. "None of our realtors have worked with anyone named Derek Mitchell. Is it possible he's working with a different agency?" I thanked her and hung up, then called 2 other real estate offices Derek had mentioned. Same result. No one had heard of Derek Mitchell or helped him search for houses. I spent Saturday morning at the bank where our family kept accounts, claiming I needed to verify information for Derek's house loan pre-approval. The loan officer was helpful but confused. "I don't show any recent mortgage applications for Derek Mitchell. Has he applied somewhere else?" He told my parents he was pre-approved for a mortgage. That's possible through another lender, but typically we'd see some kind of financial planning activity if someone was seriously preparing for home purchase. Has he been saving for a down payment or working on credit improvement? I realized I'd never seen Derek take any concrete steps toward homeownership beyond talking about it. No savings plan, no credit monitoring, no serious house hunting. The $25,000 gift was supposed to be for a house that Derek had never seriously looked for. Saturday afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just leaving quietly and letting Derek continue his manipulation, I decided to expose the truth in a way that would protect my parents from future deception. I went to Derek's room while he was out with friends and carefully photographed the fake real estate documents I'd seen him showing our parents. Using his own graphic design computer, I created a folder labeled Derek's House Project and saved copies of everything, including the fake pre-approval letters had designed. Then I set up a scenario that would reveal Derek's deception naturally. I contacted the credit card company associated with our father's emergency card, the one Derek claimed to never use, and requested a detailed statement for the past 6 months. What I found was shocking. Derek had been using the card regularly for expensive purchases, gaming equipment, designer clothes, restaurant meals, and online subscriptions. The total was nearly $15,000, all charged while Derek claimed to be struggling financially and needing help with basic expenses. Saturday evening, I arranged for the credit card company to call the house Sunday at 6 p.m. during family dinner to discuss suspicious activity on the account. I also prepared a letter explaining everything Derek had hidden, including the intercepted job offer, the fake house hunting, and the credit card fraud. Sunday morning, I packed everything I owned into my truck and storage containers, working quietly while the family attended church. By afternoon, everything I cared about was loaded and ready. I planned to leave Sunday evening, after the credit card revelation forced my parents to confront Derek's deception. Sunday at 5:30, I positioned myself in the kitchen where I could observe the family dinner and Derek's reaction to the phone call. Mom had made pot roast, Dad was discussing work projects, and Derek was describing his latest graphic design clients, probably fictional ones. At exactly 6 p.m., the phone rang. Dad answered, expecting maybe a neighbor or friend. Instead, he found himself talking to a credit card fraud specialist who needed to discuss unusual charges on the family emergency account. I watched Derek's face change as he realized what was happening. The color drained from his cheeks, and he started looking around the room like he was planning an escape route. $15,000, Dad repeated loudly. What kind of charges? Mom stopped eating and stared at Dad, who was frantically gesturing for a pen to write down information. Gaming equipment, clothing, restaurants. Dad continued, reading from his notes. These charges were made using forged signatures. Derek suddenly stood up from the dinner table. Dad, I can explain. Explain what? Mom demanded, realizing the call involved Derek somehow. Dad held up his hand for silence while he finished the conversation. When he hung up, his face was white with anger. Derek, the credit card company says someone has been forging my signature to make purchases on the emergency account. They want to know if we want to press charges for fraud. Instead of denying involvement, Derek went on the offensive. Those charges were emergencies. I needed equipment for work, and I was going to pay you back once my project started paying off. Work equipment costs $15,000, Mom asked in disbelief. And you forged Dad's signature instead of asking permission, I added quietly. Derek spun around to face me, his expression furious. This is your doing, isn't it? You called the credit card company to get me in trouble. I didn't call them, Derek. Fraud protection is automatic when someone repeatedly forges signatures. Dad was staring at the notes head taken during the phone call. Derek, this list includes charges for video games, expensive dinners, and clothing. How is any of that work related? Derek realized his initial explanation wasn't working, so he shifted tactics. You guys give me grief about not being successful, then you complain when I invest in the tools and appearance I need to build a professional image. I was trying to improve myself. By committing fraud, Mom's voice was getting higher, the way it did when she was approaching a breaking point. By taking care of necessities that you wouldn't pay for directly. Derek shot back. You're happy to give me $25,000 for a house but want help with day-to-day business expenses. That's when I pulled out my folder of research. Derek, about that house purchase, I called the realtors you mentioned. None of them have worked with you. Derek's eyes went wide, but he quickly recovered. I've been doing preliminary research online first. I haven't needed a realtor yet. What about the pre-approval letter you showed, Mom and Dad? Derek hesitated just long enough for our parents to notice. The pre-approval is from an online lender. I pulled out the printed screenshots I'd taken of Derek's fake documents. Derek, you created these fake letters using your graphic design software. The letterhead, the signatures, the loan terms. You made all of this up. Mom reached for the papers, studying them closely. As someone who worked in banking, she recognized authentic loan documents, and these clearly weren't real. Derek, she said slowly, these documents have formatting errors that no legitimate lender would make. Did you create these yourself? The room went completely silent except for the tick of the dining room clock. Derek looked at the three of us, staring at him, and something in his expression shifted from defensive to desperate. Fine, he exploded. Yes, I made the documents. Yes, I used Dad's credit card. Yes, I threw away Irvin's stupid job letter. You want to know why? Because I'm tired of being the failure in this family. The confession hung in the air like a bomb. Mom sat down heavily. Dad's face went from angry to shocked, and I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. But Derek wasn't finished. You treat me like a charity case while Irvin gets treated like the responsible son. You give me money because you feel sorry for me, but you respect him because he's everything you want in a child. Do you know what that feels like? So you decided to lie and steal. Dad's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more devastating than if Head yelled. I decided to level the playing field, Derek said. I've been recording your private conversations for months, saving embarrassing moments where you complain about neighbors, discuss family finances, and say things you'd never want public. I was planning to use those recordings if the house money wasn't enough to get me started somewhere else. Mom gasped. You've been recording us secretly. Insurance, Derek said coldly. In case you decided to cut me off financially. Blackmail is just another form of negotiation. I stared at my brother and realized Head crossed a line from manipulation into something genuinely dangerous. The Derek I'd grown up with was gone, replaced by someone willing to hurt family members without remorse. Derek, I said quietly, what you're describing isn't leveling a playing field. It's extortion and fraud. It's survival. Derek snapped. Easy for you to judge when you've always been the favorite. I was never the favorite, I replied. I was just the one who didn't steal from his parents or blackmail his family. Derek turned on me with pure hatred in his eyes. Everything that's wrong with my life is your fault, Irvin. You set an impossible standard that I could never meet. Mom and Dad look at you and see success. Then they look at me and see disappointment. I tried to get rid of you quietly, but since you're determined to destroy my plans, I guess we're doing this the hard way. Derek pulled out his phone and started scrolling through what looked like video files. Mom, Dad, remember last month when you were discussing the Johnsons' marriage problems and laughing about how their son got arrested? Or the time you called Uncle Frank an idiot for his political opinions? I have hours of footage like that. Mom's face went pale. Derek, delete those recordings immediately. Or what? You'll cut off my funding. Derek laughed bitterly. I already figured out that Irvin sabotaged the credit card situation and probably ruined my house story too. So now we negotiate new terms. Dad stood up from the dinner table, his face darker than I'd ever seen it. Derek, you're talking about blackmailing your own parents. I'm talking about getting what I deserve after years of being treated like the family disappointment while golden boy Irvin gets praised for fixing cars. Derek's phone buzzed, and his expression changed to confusion as he read what appeared to be a text message. Then confusion turned to panic. What's wrong? Mom asked, noticing Derek's sudden change in demeanor. Derek stared at his phone screen, his face going white. This is impossible, he muttered. Derek, what's happening? Dad demanded. The doorbell rang, interrupting the tense moment. Dad went to answer it while Derek frantically typed on his phone, looking increasingly desperate. Dad returned with 2 police officers, their expressions serious but professional. We're looking for Derek Mitchell, the older officer said. We need to speak with him about credit card fraud and extortion charges. Derek's phone fell from his hands and clattered on the dining room floor. How did you know? The credit card company is required to report suspected fraud to local authorities, the officer explained. We also received a tip about potential blackmail activities involving recorded conversations. I was as surprised as Derek. I'd contacted the credit card company, but I hadn't reported anything to police. Derek must have triggered automated fraud protection systems that escalated beyond family consequences. Derek Mitchell, you're under arrest for credit card fraud and attempted extortion. The officers began reading Derek his rights while he stood there in shock. Wait, Mom said desperately. Hez our son. Can't we handle this privately? Mom, fraud over $10,000 is a felony. The recorded threats against family members constitute attempted extortion. These aren't charges that can be dropped casually. Derek finally found his voice as the handcuffs clicked into place. This is Irvin's fault. He set me up. He called the police. Sir, the younger officer said. The automated fraud detection system triggered this investigation. Your brother didn't file any police reports. As Derek was led toward the front door, he turned back to our parents with desperation in his voice. Mom, Dad, you have to help me. I'll pay back the money. I'll delete the recordings. Just don't let them arrest me. Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. Derek, you threatened to blackmail your family. I don't know how to help someone who would do that, because I learned it from you. Derek screamed as the officers continued walking him toward the door. You taught me that family members are just tools to get what you want. Look how you're treating Irvin. The comparison hit our parents like a slap. Mom started crying, and Dad sank into his chair as if Derek's words had physically wounded him. After the police car pulled away, the three of us sat in the dining room, surrounded by the ruins of what used to be our family dinner. The pot roast was getting cold. Derek's chair was overturned from his dramatic arrest, and the fake house documents were scattered across the table. Irvin, Mom said through her tears, did we really teach Derek to treat family like tools? I looked at my parents, seeing them clearly for the first time in years. They weren't evil people, but they'd created a dynamic where one son was always rescued, while the other was always expected to be responsible. Derek had learned that dramatic problems got attention and resources, while steady reliability got taken for granted. You charged me rent to pay for Derek's gift, I said gently. You didn't listen when I tried to explain his manipulation. You assumed I was the problem because it was easier than questioning Derek's version of events. Dad removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. We wanted to help Derek succeed, but we ended up enabling him instead. And we took your success for granted because you never asked for help. Mom added, we thought independence meant you didn't need support or recognition. The irony was painful. Derek's arrest had accomplished what months of family meetings couldn't. It forced our parents to see the consequences of their favoritism and my role as the family scapegoat. Mom, Dad, I got the job in Cleveland. I'm moving there tomorrow. They both looked up sharply. Tomorrow, Mom asked. But Derek's in jail, and we need to figure out how to handle his legal situation. That's exactly why I'm leaving, I said as kindly as I could. Derek's consequences are his responsibility now. If I stay and help fix this crisis, we're just continuing the same pattern that created this mess. Dad leaned forward. Irvin, we know we made mistakes with Derek, but abandoning the family during a crisis won't solve anything. Dad, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm refusing to enable Derek's behavior by rescuing him from consequences he earned. There's a difference. Mom wiped her eyes. What if we promised to change? What if we went to family counseling and tried to build healthier relationships? I hope you do that, I said sincerely. But I need to build my own life away from this dysfunction. Maybe Derek needs to face real consequences without Big Brother around to blame for his problems. Dad stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where Derek had been arrested an hour earlier. We've been terrible parents to both of you, haven't we? You've been human parents who made mistakes, I corrected. But those mistakes had real consequences for both Derek and me. Mom looked at the fake house documents still scattered on the table. How did we not see that Derek was lying about everything? Because you wanted to believe he was finally getting his life together, I said. It's easier to hope someone you love is succeeding than to admit they're manipulating you. The three of us spent the next hour talking more honestly than we had in years. My parents acknowledged how their favoritism had damaged both their sons, and I explained how Derek's manipulation had escalated over time. It was painful but necessary. Around 9 p.m., I loaded the last of my belongings into my truck, while Mom and Dad watched from the front porch. The basement that had been my home for 3 years looked empty and sad, ready for Derek's creative studio that would never happen. "Will you stay in touch?" Mom asked as I prepared to leave. "Of course, but I won't be available to manage Derek's crises or mediate family problems. You'll need to handle those situations without using me as a buffer." Dad shook my hand, something he hadn't done since my college graduation. "I'm proud of the man you've become, Irvin. I should have told you that more often. Thanks, Dad. Take care of each other." As I drove away from the house where I'd grown up, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Derek was facing consequences for his choices. My parents were beginning to understand their role in the family dysfunction, and I was finally free to build a life based on my own merits rather than family expectations. The drive to Cleveland took 2 hours, giving me time to process everything that had happened. I'd secured a furnished apartment near the Precision Automotive facility, and my new job would start Monday morning. For the first time in years, my future felt entirely in my own hands. Monday morning at Precision was everything I'd hoped for. The facility was modern and well-organized. The staff was professional and welcoming, and my new role as service manager gave me responsibility for a team of 12 technicians. Mike, the general manager, spent the morning introducing me to key personnel and explaining the company's customer service philosophy. "We believe in treating employees well and letting them grow," Mike explained during lunch. "You've got great experience and strong references. We're excited to see what you can accomplish here." Tuesday evening, I got my first call from home. Mom's voice sounded tired but calmer than during the arrest drama. "Derek's been assigned a public defender," she reported. "Hez facing felony fraud charges and possible jail time. The lawyer says he'll probably get probation and community service if he pays restitution and attends counseling." "How's he handling it?" "Hez angry and scared. He keeps saying this is all your fault for leaving the family when he needed support." "Mom, Derek needed consequences, not support. Supporting him meant enabling his behavior." "I know that now," she said quietly. "Your father and I have started going to a family counselor. Shay's helping us understand how we created this situation." Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new life while getting occasional updates about Derek's legal proceedings. The credit card fraud was straightforward. Head forged signatures for $15,000 in unauthorized purchases. The attempted extortion was harder to prove since Head never actually released any recorded conversations. But the threats themselves were enough for charges. 3 months after I moved to Cleveland, Derek called me directly. His voice sounded different, more subdued and less entitled than I'd heard in years. "Irvin, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I wanted to apologize." I was surprised by the call and by Derek's tone. "How are you doing, Derek?" "I'm working at a printing shop downtown, 40 hours a week, paying off my debts. The judge ordered community service and mandatory counseling. I hate it, but I'm doing it." "That sounds like progress." "It is progress," Derek admitted. "My therapist made me write down everything I did to manipulate you and Mom and Dad. Seeing it all listed out was horrifying. I became a person I don't recognize. What changed?" Derek was quiet for a moment. "Jail. Honestly, 3 days in county lockup with guys who'd committed real crimes made me realize how far I'd fallen. I was becoming someone who hurt family members for personal gain. I'm glad you're getting help, Derek." "Irvin, I destroyed the recordings I made of our parents. All of them. And I wrote them a letter explaining every lie I told, every manipulation I used, every time I sabotaged you to make myself look better." "How did they respond?" Mom cried for 2 hours. Dad said he was proud of me for finally telling the truth, even though it was court-ordered. They're both in therapy now, trying to understand how they raised someone who thought blackmail was acceptable. Derek's transformation seemed genuine, but I was cautious about trusting it too quickly. "What happens next?" I finish my community service in 6 months. I keep working at the printing shop and going to therapy. And I try to rebuild some kind of relationship with you and our parents, if that's possible. It's possible, Derek, but it'll take time. I know. And Irvin, I owe you the biggest apology of all. You were never holding me back or making me look bad. You were just being a good person while I was choosing to be a manipulative one. The difference between us wasn't talent or opportunity, it was character. 6 months later, Derek's therapist suggested family mediation. I agreed to participate via video call, curious to see how much Derek had actually changed. The session was held in our parents' living room, with Derek joining from the counseling center where he was completing his community service. A professional mediator guided the conversation. Derek, would you like to share what you've learned about your behavior? The mediator asked. Derek looked directly into the camera, making eye contact with me for the first time in months. I learned that I spent years blaming Irvin for problems I created myself. I was jealous of his stability and work ethic, so I convinced myself that his success was making me fail. The truth is, I was making myself fail by choosing manipulation over effort. What would you do differently now? The mediator continued. I'd get a real job instead of pretending freelance work was paying bills. I'd contribute to household expenses instead of claiming I was too poor to help. I'd celebrate Irvin's successes instead of resenting them. Derek paused. And I'd never, ever spy on my family or steal from them. Mom and Dad both looked older but more at peace than they had during the crisis months. They'd been attending weekly therapy sessions and had developed insight into their own role in the family dysfunction. We realize now that we taught Derek to expect special treatment while teaching Irvin that love had to be earned, Mom said during the session. Both messages were harmful in different ways. The hardest thing to accept, Dad added, is that our favoritism didn't help Derek succeed. It taught him that problems could be solved through manipulation rather than effort. 8 months after leaving home, I drove back to Canton for Derek's community service graduation ceremony. Had completed 300 hours of service at a local food bank and had been offered a permanent position in their administrative department. Derek looked healthier and more confident than I'd seen him since high school. The entitlement and resentment that had defined his personality for years had been replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. How's the new job? I asked as we walked through downtown Canton after the ceremony. It's good, honest work, Derek said. I'm managing their volunteer scheduling system and helping with grant applications. Turns out I actually am good with computers when I use the skills for legitimate purposes. And the therapy. Hard but necessary. I had to confront the fact that I'd become someone willing to hurt people I claimed to love. That's not who I want to be. We stopped outside the coffee shop where Derek used to work before deciding he was too creative for regular employment. Irvin, I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that losing you was the wake-up call I needed. When you left, I couldn't blame my problems on anyone else anymore. Derek, we're family. I never stopped loving you, even when I couldn't trust you. Do you think we can be brothers again? Real brothers, not competitors. I looked at Derek and saw someone who'd done genuine work to change himself. The transformation wasn't complete. Rebuilding character takes years, but the foundation was there. I think we can try, I said. 1 year after moving to Cleveland, I was thriving in ways I'd never expected. Precision Automotive had promoted me to regional service manager, overseeing 3 locations. I'd bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, and I'd started dating Sarah, a nurse who appreciated my stability and kindness. Life felt balanced and purposeful. Derek had completed his community service and was working full-time at the food bank while taking night classes in nonprofit management. Had moved into his own apartment, paying rent and utilities without family assistance for the first time in his adult life. Our parents had made significant changes too. They'd completed a year of family therapy and had learned to treat their adult children as independent people rather than extensions of their own hopes and fears. Mom returned to college to finish her degree, something Shed abandoned when Derek was born. Dad started volunteering at a literacy program, finding fulfillment in helping others rather than fixing Derek's problems. The real test of our family's healing came when Derek asked if he could visit me in Cleveland. I agreed, curious to see how he'd interact with my new life. Derek arrived on a Friday evening, driving a used car he'd bought with his own money. He seemed genuinely interested in my house, my job, and my relationship with Sarah. There was no jealousy or resentment in his questions, just brotherly curiosity. "This place is great, Irvin," he said as I gave him a tour. "You've built something really solid here. Thanks. It feels good to have my own space." That weekend, Derek met Sarah and several of my coworkers at a barbecue I hosted. He was charming and engaging without being manipulative, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories about his work at the food bank. Watching him interact with other people, I saw glimpses of the brother Eid remembered from childhood, before the entitlement and resentment had taken over. Sunday morning, Derek and I went for a walk through my neighborhood. He seemed thoughtful and was quieter than usual. "Irvin, can I ask you something? Aren't you angry with me?" "What do you mean?" "I cost you years of peace with our family. I sabotaged opportunities, stole from our parents, and tried to manipulate everyone around me. If someone had done that to me, I'd be furious." I considered his question carefully. "I was angry, Derek, for a long time, but staying angry would have hurt me more than it hurt you. How did you let go of it?" "I realized that your behavior was about your own pain and insecurity, not about me, and I saw that you were capable of change when you faced real consequences." Derek stopped walking and turned to face me. "Do you really believe I've changed, or are you just being polite?" "I believe you're changing," I said honestly. "Character transformation is a process, not an event. But yes, I can see the difference in you." Derek smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked completely genuine. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. You're my brother, Derek. That doesn't change just because we went through a difficult period." 6 months later, Derek was accepted into a master's program for nonprofit administration with a scholarship based on his work at the food bank and his essay about personal transformation. Our parents attended his graduation ceremony, and for the first time, their pride in Derek was based on actual accomplishments rather than potential. During the ceremony, Derek gave a speech about second chances and family healing. He publicly acknowledged the mistakes that had led to his legal troubles and thanked his family for not enabling his destructive behavior. "Sometimes the most loving thing family can do is refuse to rescue you from consequences you've earned," he said, looking directly at me in the audience. "My brother taught me that by having the courage to walk away when staying would have been easier." 2 years after leaving Canton, I married Sarah in a small ceremony in Cleveland. Derek served as my best man, and our parents attended without any drama or manipulation. During his toast, Derek spoke about learning to celebrate other people's happiness rather than feeling threatened by it. "Irvin taught me that success isn't a competition between brothers," Derek said. "There's enough happiness and accomplishment in the world for both of us." The most meaningful moment came during the reception when Derek pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Irvin, I need to tell you something I've never said before. I'm proud of you, not just for your job or your marriage, but for the man you've become despite having a brother who tried to sabotage your happiness for years. Derek, you became the man you were supposed to be once you stopped competing with me and started focusing on your own growth. Do you think we would have figured this out if you hadn't left?" I considered the question seriously. "Probably not. You needed consequences, and I needed space. Sometimes family members have to separate before they can come together in a healthy way. I'm grateful you had the strength to do what was right instead of what was easy." 5 years after leaving my parents' house, our family had rebuilt itself on completely new foundations. Derek had earned a master's degree and was managing programs for a statewide nonprofit organization. Our parents had developed interests and identities beyond managing their children's problems. And I had built a life based on my own choices and values rather than family expectations. The most important lesson I learned was that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to participate in unhealthy dynamics. By walking away from a situation where I was being used and manipulated, I created space for everyone to grow into better versions of themselves. Derek learned that manipulation destroys relationships, while integrity builds them. Our parents learned that favoritism hurts both children, not just the one who doesn't receive special treatment. And I learned that I could love my family without sacrificing my own well-being to enable their dysfunction. Real love requires accountability, not unconditional enabling. When we hold family members responsible for their choices, we give them the opportunity to develop character and self-respect. When we rescue them from consequences, we teach them that their actions don't matter and that other people exist to solve their problems. The golden child dynamic that nearly destroyed our family was replaced by relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Derek's success in nonprofit work was more meaningful than any fake achievements he could have manipulated, and our parents' pride in both their sons was based on real accomplishments rather than favoritism or pity. Today, Derek and I talk regularly, not because we have to as family members, but because we genuinely enjoy each other's company. Our parents visit both of us and treat us as independent adults, rather than chess pieces in their own emotional drama. The house where I used to pay rent to subsidize Derek's imaginary house fund has been sold, and our parents moved to a smaller place where they're building their own retirement dreams. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Id signed that lease and stayed in the basement, paying $800 monthly to fund Derek's deception. I probably would have enabled his behavior for years, watching him spiral deeper into manipulation and fraud, while sacrificing my own opportunities for stability and happiness. Instead, choosing to leave forced everyone in our family to confront hard truths and make difficult changes. Derek faced consequences that motivated genuine transformation. Our parents learned that love means holding people accountable, not rescuing them from their choices. And I discovered that I could build a meaningful life based on my own efforts and values. The most profound realization was that walking away from family dysfunction isn't abandoning the people you love. It's refusing to participate in patterns that hurt everyone involved. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create space for people to grow into who they're supposed to be, even if that growth requires temporary separation and difficult consequences. Family relationships are worth fighting for, but fighting for them sometimes means fighting against unhealthy dynamics rather than accepting them. Real healing requires truth, accountability, and the courage to change, even when change is painful and uncertain. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between enabling a family member's destructive behavior or stepping back to let them face consequences? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to participate in dynamics that hurt everyone involved. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding the courage to make difficult but necessary changes. Share this with someone who might benefit from hearing that setting boundaries with family isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most loving choice you can make. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own family relationships with wisdom and strength.